My 45th birthday. I'd always made a point of spending it with my mom, Carol. Dad had passed away a few years back, and it felt important to keep those traditions alive. We usually went out to a nice restaurant, her treat, and just caught up. Nothing too fancy, but always pleasant. This year, though, felt a little different. She'd insisted on having dinner at her place, which was unusual. I arrived at her house in the late afternoon, a bottle of her favorite wine in hand. The house looked the same as always, a little cluttered but cozy. Mom greeted me with a hug that felt a touch too tight, and her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said, her voice a little strained. "Thanks, Mom," I replied, handing her the wine. "Anything wrong? You seem a little off." She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, nothing, honey. Just a bit tired. Come on in. I've made your favorite lasagna." We sat down to eat, and the lasagna was, as always, fantastic. But the conversation felt stilted. Mom kept fiddling with her fork and avoided eye contact. Finally, after a few awkward silences, she sighed and put her fork down. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's about the will." My stomach immediately clenched. Dad's will had been settled years ago. Everything split evenly between Mom and me. What could possibly be wrong now? "What about it, Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She took a deep breath. "Well, you know how I remarried last year? To Richard. Richard, a guy I'd never really warmed up to. He seemed nice enough on the surface, a retired accountant Mom had met at her book club. But something about him felt off. Maybe it was the way he always seemed to be hovering around Mom, or maybe it was just my protective instincts kicking in. "Yeah, what about him?" "Well," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before we got married, Richard had a daughter from his first marriage. Her name is Tiffany. Well, she's had some tough times lately." I waited, a knot of apprehension tightening in my chest. Where was this going? Mom finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and something else I couldn't quite decipher. "Ethan, I've made some changes to my will." "Changes?" I repeated, my voice flat. She nodded miserably. "Yes, I've decided to leave your inheritance to Tiffany." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You've what?" "Mom, that's everything. Dad wanted us to have it." "I know, honey, I know," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. Her hand felt cold and clammy. "But Tiffany really needs it. She's going through a divorce. She lost her job. She has nothing, Ethan." "And what about me, Mom?" I asked, pulling my hand away. My voice was rising, despite my best efforts to keep it calm. "What about the years I helped you out after Dad passed? The times I fixed the house, ran errands, just was there for you?" She looked down at her hands. "I know you have, sweetheart, and I appreciate it. But you're doing so well, Ethan. You have a good job, a nice house. So because I'm not struggling, I don't deserve what Dad wanted me to have?" I interrupted, the anger bubbling up inside me. "That's not fair, Mom. It's not about deserving, Ethan," she pleaded. "It's about need. Tiffany needs this money more than you do." I stood up, suddenly feeling suffocated in the small kitchen. I walked over to the window and stared out at the backyard, the familiar swing set looking strangely alien. 20 years. 20 years I'd spent working my way up in my company, saving every penny, always knowing that there would be a little something extra down the line, a safety net. And now it was gone. Gone to a woman I'd met maybe twice in my life. "Mom," I said, turning back to face her. "How could you do this without even talking to me about it?" She started to cry, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you wouldn't understand, Ethan. I knew you'd be angry." "You're right, Mom. I am angry," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm hurt. I feel like you don't trust me, like you don't value me." "That's not true," she sobbed. "I love you, Ethan. But I just felt like this was the right thing to do. The right thing to do? To completely disregard my father's wishes. To essentially disinherit me in favor of a stepsister I barely knew? felt like a slap in the face. I remembered all the times I'd put my life on hold to help them. When Dad had his heart scare, I'd taken weeks off work to drive him to appointments and help Mom around the house. When their roof needed replacing, I'd spent my weekends getting quotes and overseeing the repairs. They'd always told me how much they appreciated it, how lucky they were to have such a reliable son. But apparently, that reliability didn't extend to needing a share of my father's legacy. The conversation went in circles for a while, Mom crying and pleading, me trying to understand her reasoning but feeling increasingly betrayed. She kept repeating that Tiffany needed the money more, that I would be fine. It was like she'd already written me off, decided that my feelings didn't matter. Eventually, I told her I needed to leave. I couldn't sit there anymore, listening to her justifications. As I walked towards the door, she called out, "Ethan, wait!" I stopped and turned back. She was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, her eyes red and puffy. "There's one more thing," she said hesitantly. "Tiffany is having a really hard time and, well, she's moving in with me for a while, just until she gets back on her feet." My jaw dropped. Not only had she given away my inheritance, but she was also taking in this complete stranger? "Mom, are you serious?" I asked incredulously. "You're going to let her live here?" "She needs a place to stay, Ethan," she said defensively. "And this house is big enough for both of us." "But what about me?" I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "What about when I come to visit? Am I just supposed to—" "What?" She shrugged, a gesture that infuriated me. "We'll figure it out, honey. You can always stay in the guest room." The guest room. The small, dusty room that had barely been touched since Dad passed. It suddenly felt like a symbol of my place in her life, an afterthought. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and walked out the door, the bottle of wine still sitting on the kitchen counter. The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing, trying to process everything Mom had told me. Betrayal, anger, confusion. It was a toxic cocktail of emotions swirling inside me. The next few days were a haze. I went to work, went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying the conversation with Mom, trying to make sense of it. How could she do this? How could she so easily dismiss my feelings, my father's wishes? Then, a few days later, I got a text from Mom. "Ethan, could you possibly help me out with something? The washing machine broke down, and the repairman is quoting a ridiculous price. You're so good with these things." I stared at the text message, my blood boiling. She had just completely upended my life, given away my inheritance to a stranger. And now she wanted me to come over and fix her washing machine? The audacity. I typed out a quick reply, "Sorry, Mom. I'm busy." A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was her. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Ethan, honey, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "You haven't been answering my calls." "What do you think is wrong, Mom?" I retorted, my voice sharper than I intended. "You just told me you're giving away my inheritance to your new husband's daughter. What did you expect?" "I told you. She needs it, Ethan," she said, her tone becoming defensive. "And the washing machine is really important. We need clean clothes. Maybe Tiffany can handle it," I suggested, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. "After all, she's the one who's going to be inheriting everything. Maybe she can use some of that money to buy a new one." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Mom sighed. "Ethan, please don't be like this. We're family." "Family?" I scoffed. "Is that what you call this? Because it sure doesn't feel like it to me." "Look, can you just come over and take a look at the washing machine?" she pleaded. I really don't know what to do. I hesitated. A part of me, the part that had always been the dutiful son, wanted to say yes. But the other part, the part that felt betrayed and undervalued, was screaming no. "No, Mom," I said finally. "I can't. I have plans." "Plans?" she repeated, her voice incredulous. "What plans could be more important than helping your own mother?" "Maybe the plans I had for my future." "Mom," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "The future that you just took away from me." I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. Felt good, finally standing up for myself. But it also felt incredibly lonely. I knew I was creating a rift between Mom and me, but I didn't see any other way. The next few weeks were filled with awkward silences and unanswered calls. Mom tried to reach out a few times, leaving tearful voicemails, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Every time I thought about her decision, the anger would resurface. Then I got another text message. This time it was from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi Ethan, it's Tiffany. Your mom said you might be able to help with something at the house." I stared at the message, my eyes narrowed. So, Mom was already enlisting her new favorite child to get things done. I deleted the message without replying. A few days later, I was at work when I got a call from Mom. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Ethan, you need to come home," she said, her voice frantic. "There's been an accident." My heart leaped into my throat. "What happened? Are you okay?" "It's Richard," she sobbed. He fell down the stairs. He's in the hospital." I felt a pang of guilt. Despite everything, he was still Mom's husband. "Oh no, Mom. I'm so sorry. What happened?" "I don't know, he was carrying a box down from the attic and he tripped. The doctors aren't sure how bad it is yet." "I'll be right there," I said, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. When I arrived at the hospital, Mom was sitting in the waiting room, her face pale and drawn. Tiffany was there too, looking equally distraught. I nodded to her curtly and sat down next to Mom. "How is he?" I asked. "They're still running tests," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It doesn't look good, Ethan. They think he might have broken his hip. Maybe even something worse." We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, a doctor came out and called Mom's name. We all stood up. "Mr. Henderson has a fractured hip and a mild concussion," the doctor explained. "He'll need surgery and then several weeks of rehabilitation." Mom burst into tears, and Tiffany put an arm around her. I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Richard was hurt, but it could have been worse. Over the next few weeks, I found myself spending more and more time at Mom's house, helping out with Richard. He was immobile after the surgery and needed constant care. Tiffany did what she could, but she seemed overwhelmed. Mom was exhausted. Despite my resentment towards Richard and the whole situation with the will, I couldn't just stand by and watch Mom struggle. So I helped with the cooking, the cleaning, the errands. I even took some time off work to drive Richard to his physical therapy appointments. During this time, I started to get to know Tiffany a little better. She was younger than me, maybe in her late 30s, and she did seem genuinely down on her luck. Her divorce had been messy, and she'd lost her job as a result. She was clearly grateful for Mom's help and seemed genuinely concerned about Richard. One afternoon, while I was helping Richard with his exercises, Tiffany came into the living room with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me. "Thanks, Ethan," she said, her voice quiet. "I really appreciate you being here." "It's no problem," I replied, taking a sip of the coffee. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "Your mom told me about the will." I stiffened. "Oh, did she?" Tiffany nodded. "Yeah. I didn't know. She just said she wanted to help me out." "Well, she's certainly doing that," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. Tiffany looked down at her hands. "I feel bad about it, Ethan. It's not fair to you." I was surprised by her honesty. "No, it's not," I agreed. "I told your mom she didn't have to do this," Tiffany continued. "I can figure things out on my own." "Apparently, she didn't agree," I said dryly. We sat in silence for a few moments. Then, Tiffany looked up at me, her eyes earnest. "Look, Ethan, I don't want any trouble. When I get back on my feet, I'll talk to your mom. Maybe we can figure something else out." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her, but another part was still too angry and hurt. As the weeks went by, Richard slowly started to recover. He was still a bit frail, but he was able to move around on his own again. Tiffany started looking for a job, and Mom seemed a little less stressed. One evening, Mom asked me to stay for dinner. Richard was sitting at the table, looking much better than he had a few weeks ago. Tiffany was there too. Felt a little like a forced family dinner. During the meal, Mom cleared her throat. "There's something I want to talk about," she said, looking at me. I braced myself. "Here it comes. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," she continued. "About the will, about everything." Richard and Tiffany exchanged nervous glances. I just waited, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Ethan," Mom said, her voice trembling slightly, "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I was trying to help Tiffany, but I went about it the wrong way." My heart skipped a beat. Was she actually apologizing? "I've decided to make some changes to the will again," she said, looking at both Tiffany and me. "I'm going to split everything evenly between the three of us, or you, Ethan, and you, Tiffany." I stared at her, stunned. I hadn't expected this. Tiffany looked equally surprised. "Mom, you don't have to do that," she said. "I told you I can manage." "Nonsense," Mom said firmly. "You're part of the family now, Tiffany. And Ethan, you're my son. It's the only fair thing to do." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved, but another part was still wary. Was this genuine? Or was she just trying to smooth things over? "Thank you, Mom," I said finally, my voice a little choked. "I should be thanking you, Ethan," she said, her eyes filled with tears. "You've been so good to us, especially with Richard. I don't know what we would have done without you." The rest of the dinner was less tense. We talked about Richard's recovery, Tiffany's job search, and just general things. Felt almost normal. But as I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. Why the sudden change of heart? Was it just guilt? Or was there something else going on? A few days later, I got a call from my Aunt Susan, Mom's sister. "Ethan, have you talked to your mother recently?" she asked, her voice sounding worried. "Yeah, I had dinner with her a few nights ago," I replied. "Why?" "She called me today," Aunt Susan said. "She sounded really upset. She said she had a big fight with Richard." "About what?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Apparently, he's been asking her for money," Aunt Susan said. "A lot of money. He wants her to invest in some business venture he's been talking about." My blood ran cold. This was it, wasn't it? Richard had been after Mom's money all along. And Tiffany, was she in on it too? "Mom said she told him no," Aunt Susan continued. "And he got really angry. He said some nasty things." "Did she say what kind of business venture?" I asked, my mind racing. "Something about a can't-miss opportunity in cryptocurrency," Aunt Susan said with a sigh. "You know how Richard is with those get-rich-quick schemes." I did know. Mom had mentioned a few things Richard had tried in the past, all of which had ended in disaster. "Mom sounded really shaken up," Aunt Susan said. "She said Richard even threatened to leave her if she didn't give him the money." My anger flared. How dare he treat my mother like this? After everything she'd done for him? "I think you should go talk to her, Ethan," Aunt Susan said. "She needs you." I hung up the phone, my mind made up. I was going over to Mom's house right now. I needed to find out what was really going on. This whole situation with the will, with Tiffany moving in, with Richard's sudden accident. It was all starting to feel very suspicious. And I had a feeling the truth was about to come out. I practically sped over to Mom's house. When I got there, the front door was unlocked. I walked in to find Mom sitting on the sofa in the living room, staring blankly ahead. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked utterly defeated. "Mom," I said softly, kneeling down in front of her. Aunt Susan called me. "What happened?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's awful." "Richard?" I asked. She nodded. "What did he do?" He yelled at me," she sobbed. "He called me names. He said I was ruining his life because I wouldn't give him the money." "What money?" I asked, even though I already had a pretty good idea. "For his investment," she said, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "He said it was a sure thing that we could double our money." "Mom, you know those things are risky," I said gently. You can't just give him a large sum of money like that. I told him no, she said, her voice trembling. And he got so angry, Ethan. He said if I didn't trust him, then maybe we shouldn't be married. My blood boiled. The nerve of this guy. He'd only been in Mom's life for a year, and he was already trying to manipulate her and take her money. Where is he now? I asked, my voice tight. He stormed out, she said. He said he was going to find someone who believed in him. I sat down next to her and put my arm around her. Mom, you did the right thing. You can't let him pressure you like this. She leaned her head against my shoulder and started to cry again. I feel so stupid, Ethan. I thought he was a good man. He's not, I said firmly. He's a con artist. He's trying to take advantage of you. But Tiffany, she said, pulling away and looking at me with a confused expression. She seems so nice. She's been so helpful with Richard. That's when it hit me. Tiffany. Her sudden appearance, her financial troubles, her moving in. It all seemed too convenient. Mom, I said slowly. I think we need to talk about Tiffany. Mom looked at me, her brow furrowed. What about her? She's been nothing but kind. Mom, did Richard ever talk to you about Tiffany before you got married? I asked. She thought for a moment. Well, he mentioned her a few times. Said she was having a hard time. Why? Did he ever ask you to help her out financially? She hesitated. He might have mentioned it once or twice, but I didn't think much of it. Mom, I said, taking her hands in mine. I think Richard and Tiffany might be working together. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What? No, Ethan, that's impossible. Tiffany is like a daughter to me. Think about it, Mom, I urged. Tiffany shows up right around the time you get serious with Richard. She's conveniently down on her luck. And then, suddenly, you decide to change your will and leave everything to her. Mom shook her head. But I changed it back, Ethan. I'm splitting everything between the three of us now. After Richard threw a fit about his investment, I pointed out. Maybe that was part of their plan too. Get you to change the will, then pressure you for money. Mom's face crumpled. Oh, Ethan, do you really think so? I don't know for sure, Mom, but it seems suspicious. And what about Richard's accident? Did you actually see him fall? She hesitated again. No, I was in the kitchen. I just heard a loud noise. And Tiffany was here? Yes. She said she was upstairs. The pieces were starting to fall into place. It was all too perfect. Richard's sudden need for money, Tiffany's convenient presence, the change in the will. Mom, I said, my voice serious. I think you need to be careful. I don't trust them. Just then, the front door opened, and Tiffany walked in. She looked surprised to see me. Oh, hi, Ethan. Is everything okay? Mom looked from me to Tiffany, her expression a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Tiffany, I said, my voice calm but firm. Can I talk to you for a moment? She looked wary. Sure. What is it? I just want to ask you a few questions about Richard's business venture, I said. Tiffany's eyes darted to Mom, then back to me. I don't know anything about that. Really? I said, raising an eyebrow. Because I heard he was trying to get Mom to invest a lot of money. Tiffany's face flushed. Well, he might have mentioned it. And what did you think about that? I pressed. She hesitated. I thought it sounded like a good opportunity. Even though Mom told him no? Tiffany shifted uncomfortably. He was just excited about it. And what about the will, Tiffany? I asked, cutting to the chase. Were you aware that Mom had initially left everything to you? Tiffany's eyes widened, and she looked at Mom, her face pale. No, I swear. Ethan, I didn't know anything about that. Mom looked at Tiffany, her expression hardening. Is that true, Tiffany? You didn't know? Tiffany's composure finally cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes. Okay, fine, she said, her voice trembling. Richard told me, but he said it was just temporary, until I got back on my feet. And did he also tell you about his brilliant cryptocurrency investment? I asked. Tiffany looked down at the floor, shame evident on her face. Yes. And did he tell you that he was planning to pressure Mom into giving him the money? Tiffany didn't answer. The silence in the room was deafening. Mom stood up, her hands shaking. Tiffany, she said, her voice trembling with anger. How could you do this to me? I took you in. I tried to help you. I'm sorry, Carol, Tiffany sobbed. Richard, he convinced me it was the only way. He said we both deserved a better life. A better life by scamming my mother? I interjected, my voice filled with disgust. The truth was out in the open now. Richard and Tiffany had been working together, manipulating Mom for her money. The whole thing, from Tiffany's arrival to Richard's accident, had been a carefully orchestrated plan. Mom was devastated. She sank back onto the sofa, tears streaming down her face. I sat down next to her and put my arm around her again. It's okay, Mom, I said softly. We'll figure this out. I feel so foolish, she sobbed. I trusted them. It's not your fault, Mom, I said. They're the ones who should be ashamed. The next few days were a whirlwind. Mom kicked Tiffany out of the house immediately. We changed the locks and contacted a lawyer to review the will and make sure everything was in order. Mom was adamant that Richard was out of her life for good, and I supported her decision completely. Richard tried to call a few times, leaving angry and threatening voicemails, but Mom refused to answer. We even considered getting a restraining order, but he eventually seemed to get the message and stopped calling. The whole ordeal left Mom feeling shaken and vulnerable. She leaned on me a lot during that time, and I was happy to be there for her. We talked for hours, and she finally started to see Richard and Tiffany for who they really were. As for the will, Mom decided to go back to her original plan, splitting everything evenly between us, just as Dad had wanted. It felt like the right thing to do, a way of honoring his memory and acknowledging the bond between us. Things slowly started to return to normal. Mom started going out with her friends again, and she even joined a new book club. She seemed to be finding her footing again, stronger and more independent than before. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Tiffany. She apologized for everything that had happened, saying that she'd gotten caught up in Richard's schemes and that she deeply regretted hurting Mom and me. She said she was trying to turn her life around and had even found a new job. I didn't reply to the letter. While I appreciated her apology, I wasn't ready to forgive her just yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Life went on. I continued to visit Mom regularly, and our relationship grew stronger than ever. We talked openly and honestly, and I knew that she trusted me completely. One day, I was at Mom's house, helping her with some gardening. She stopped for a moment, wiped her brow, and looked at me with a thoughtful expression. You know, Ethan, she said, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened with Richard and Tiffany. Me too, Mom, I replied. And I realized something, she continued. Even though it was a terrible experience, it taught me a valuable lesson. What's that? I asked. It showed me who my real family is, she said, smiling at me. It showed me how lucky I am to have you, Ethan. You were always there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. I smiled back at her, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. I'll always be here for you, Mom. And I meant it. Despite the pain and betrayal, our bond had survived. We had faced a difficult situation together, and it had ultimately brought us closer. As for my inheritance, it didn't really matter anymore. What mattered was the relationship I had with my mom, the trust and love that we shared. That was worth more than any amount of money.